Ready to unlock the secrets to optimal mobility? In this episode, we explore the fascinating world of physical fitness with Dr. Laura Kummerle. Dive deep into the science of cholesterol management beyond the basics and uncover hidden toxins lurking in your everyday products. But that's not all. We'll also bust some long-time standing medical myths that might just change the way you view your health. Stay tuned because you're about to discover could change your life.
The Discovery Doc podcast, where your journey to empowered, non-toxic living begins. Join me, Dr. CeCe, a doctor of nursing practice, self-proclaimed Toxin Tamer, and mama of four, alongside
me, Annah Kate, your medical mystery overachiever. Together, we'll uncover the latest in functional medicine, debunk health myths, tame toxins, and provide practical tips for thriving in a modern world.
Get ready to take control of your health with expert insights, raw stories, and actionable wellness strategies designed to help you and your family lead vibrant, toxin-free lives.
Let's discover together. Welcome back to the Discovery Doc podcast, and we are joined again by Dr. Laura Kummerle.
Hey, we got
Yay! Okay, I had to think about it for a second. So if you missed our first introduction, make sure that you go back and listen because she dropped some bombs, some nuggets about a movement diet.
Yeah.
I've never heard that in all of the things that I've done. I've never heard of a movement diet, and I have a functional movement certification.
Yeah.
You would think.
We're here to continue the conversation, and this time I want to get into kind of women specifically. No offense, men. We'll get back on, talking about y'all, but with women specifically, there's just so many more hormonal changes that we go throughout our entire lives, right? There's puberty for men too, but puberty and then into getting our menstrual cycles throughout the month and our cycles changing and our hormones changing, and then postmenopausal and kind of that time where you're peri, post, pre, and that can last 10 years. So I just think for women, there can be a lot more variables potentially for men when it comes to how we feel throughout the month. So for you, what is the importance, if you're working with a woman or just giving advice to a woman, what is the importance of women understanding our bodies and where we're at hormonally as that relates to movement?
I think so there's a lot of research going on. It's kind of a hot topic about cycling your workouts with your cycle. And depending on the person, that may or may not be needed. We are all very individualized with our experience throughout our cycle. So first of all, it's tuning into how you feel at different parts and just noticing patterns, potentially writing things down. It's okay, is it a consistent pattern or was it because something in life popped up and that's why you were tired? So turning in, listening to your body. And yes, we can have, ligament laxity a little bit more at certain parts of our cycle. You might need a little bit more sleep at another part of your cycle. But that's all very individualized. And so what I like to do to kind of balance that out is more thinking about when you're strength training, using RPE or reps in reserve. So rating of perceived exertion is going to take into account how you're feeling that day. So if maybe you're back squatting and you're just doing, let's say you're holding I'm just gonna use random weight. So the 25-pound dumbbell. And you're able to do 10 reps that way, and maybe you have 2 reps in reserve, so that would be an RPE of 8. So you're getting close. 0 is chilling, pretty much sleeping, not doing anything. 10 is maxing out. And so you're getting close to working towards failure. But then maybe another day, maybe you didn't sleep as well, maybe you haven't fueled your body well, maybe it's a 9 or 10. And so maybe that, if your goal RPE is that 8, maybe you drop the weight that day. And that's kind of how you can naturally, without switching up your entire workout, you can adjust things based on how you feel. And that can be menstrual cycle related or just recovery related.
Right. Yeah. I think that I tell my patients all the time, because a lot, for my patients, some patients get really hyperfixated on numbers and labs and the number that is associated with that lab. And at the end of the day, yes, there are some things that I'm very picky about, that I want to see numbers a certain way. But at the end of the day, it's you being in tune enough with your own body to know that there's something's up and something's off. Even if that number looks good, no, I don't feel good. This is not me. or vice versa. If that number, if you're that number is kind of out of this optimal perfect little box, but that's your number and it looks good and to you, or you feel good, it's being in tune enough with yourself to understand that. And that is a great point. That does fluctuate. Even if you take hormones out of it, it fluctuates in just day to day. Did your kids keep you up all night last night? Did you, were you traveling and you feel more run down? And I think in terms of just coming from a place, and by no means was I like this high level athlete like my husband, but in a place where I was always active my whole life, I didn't do a good job listening to that, because mentally I'd be like, no, I know I could get this. I know my standard is this. And so I want to achieve that. And so that would kind of be my mindset, instead of giving myself a little grace and saying, you know what, today it's not that. And that's okay. I'm still going to get a good workout in. I'm still going to get movement in. And I think it's taken me a long time to get to the point where that grace was given.
Yeah.
You have a really unique, I think. So tell Dr. Laura a little bit about, and our audience, kind of your history, just briefly, with like, I'm not going to go into your.
No, I mean, about
like,
competing and all of that. Yeah.
And I think that's really valid here.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say, is being in a competitive sport. So before my whole, just FYI, when I was 27, I ended up in the hospital with a PE, got 5 bags of blood and 18 co-infections, and put me down the journey, triggered my lupus and APS and all the medical mystery overachieverness that is me. But before that, I had competed in NPC bikini, and my coach cut all the fat out of my diet, totally screwed up my system. And I was doing 2-a-days. I would get up at 4 a.m, eat or go work out, and then come home and eat, take a nap, get up and go to work, and work until lunch, eat again, and then do an afternoon workout, and then do evening cardio. So I was totally killing my adrenal system during that time. And I had I don't want to let my coach down, and I want to see my body change, but I wasn't fueling my body with the fats and the things that it needed to properly do that. And then fast forward a couple of years. So this was like 2018, 2019, I started doing personal training, and I was a cycle coach. Like, I would do cycling classes. Well, I'm riding 60, sometimes 80 miles, teaching 3 or 4 classes a day, killing myself. And so my adrenals, I burn them out again, but that was part of my job. So I think that we have those catalysts in our life that it's either competitive, or we do it for a job, or we have to show up for other people, whether that's, like, we just have to have the grace to say, no, I don't want to do it. And there are some days that I talk,
or I can't do
yeah,
it,
like teaching off the bike.
Can't.
Yeah. And then my body's gaining weight and doing all the things that, because I'm overstressing it and doing way too much cardio.
Yeah.
And then it's also like, if you have to do something, counter it with something else. So like, maybe you have to get a workout in, but maybe you can supplement your recovery another way, whether it's fueling your body with the nutrients, or maybe getting some more sleep, or something else to kind of help support your body to make it a little bit easier, because life happens and sometimes we have those demands that we need to do, but we can give it a little extra boost with something else as well, knowing it's a short-term thing, not a long-term thing.
So what are your best ways to navigate that and balance with that grace and patience for yourself? And then while also getting in that movement, like, what would be your best doctor recommended protocol?
I mean, something is better than nothing. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but like, I'll use an example. I've been working on my handstand push-up for about a year, let's just say. And that's one thing that I noticed the biggest difference at throughout my cycle. So like, second the luteal phase hits, it's like, no, I can barely do one. But like the day before, perfectly fine. And so it's saying, even instead of just saying like, no, I'm not going to do those the second half of my cycle, I knew that doing something, practicing that movement pattern, whether it's an easier variation, reducing the range of motion, doing a modification, things like that, is still going to help me reach my goals. And then the funny thing is, like, this, I've done that a couple times, and then the second that I get my period, it's like, boom, PR. And you're just like, oh. So like, just keep going and listen to your body, make those adjustments, but still keep working to whatever, like, meet your body where it's at. And then you'll still make progress over the course of time.
Yeah. And not every workout has to be a balls to the wall and that
Yes.
Lord.
I think that's a wonderful point because I do think a lot of people, myself included in the past, it's like if you weren't making progress in your head, what is considered progress, then what's the point? You know, if I'm used to getting a movement to a certain degree and then I'm backtracking, it's not really backtracking, but to me in my brain it's backtracking, then what's the point? So I think that's a great example that even if it doesn't look like it looked yesterday, that you can still progress forward to achieving that goal, you know, even if it's looks a little bit different than the day before. So
Yeah, you can't jump on a trampoline right now.
no, my back would absolutely both my discs would just go, there's no way. Why'd you have to put me under the bus like that?
Because I like rebounding because that's safe
I
for
want
my
to rebound
joints.
so bad, yes, but no, it would absolutely destroy me right now. My body's not in place. So
Sorry.
a deep dive question for you. Are we ready?
We're ready
for our deep
Yes.
dive. There are so many stinking fads out there as it comes to movement. So many. What is your biggest piece of advice to women specifically to just maintain movement, just bare bones, maintain movement without all the noise of what we see on Instagram and social media and the things that we should be doing? Biggest piece of advice just to maintain movement no matter where you are in life, what your hormones look like.
The basics always win. So whatever, the thing is, like, it's going to depend on preferences as well. So finding something that you enjoy that's sustainable over the long term. It doesn't matter if it's super popular. If it is, cool. If it's not, cool. You can use those fads to potentially try something new and see if you do like it. I mean, movement is movement, and there are pros and cons to all different styles of movement. So just getting in some movement is better than nothing, and then you can supplement it with the basics. So again, going back to the categories of movement, some sort of like cardiovascular training, whether it's going on a walk or a brisk walk or whatever, jog, swim, bike, whatever. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Some sort of strength training, whether it's, you know, doing squats with your kid, carrying them, things like that. Or even just playing with them, like, you can do a little bench press laying on your back, pushing them, like, and kids love that. And then, so strength training, and then some of the mobility training, including that sitting down on the ground, little things like that. Just the basics always win, basically.
Yeah, I love that. I think, again, just mentally, a lot of people have that roadblock of, oh, if I can't get this 60-minute workout in, if I can't get this 30-minute workout in, then I don't do anything. But there's so many opportunities throughout your day to just counteract, like you've been saying, kind of the being stagnant or stationary, and just little things. You're right. Like throwing a 30-pound kid up in the air, holy moly, like that is movement. That counts, guys. You know, it doesn't have to be a set designated time where you're in the gym. It can look
it could also be like while you're brushing your teeth, maybe you get a little stretch in. While you're waiting for your morning cup of coffee, you're doing something. It can be snuck in at different times of the day.
Yes.
So do you recommend cardio, strength, and mobility in any combination every single day, or do you implement rest days, or like, tell us that protocol?
It depends person to person on what specifically fits into their life at that given time. You can make progress with 2 days of strength training if you really wanted to. Depending on the person, they might want to do like 6 days. I don't necessarily recommend doing 7 full days of strength training just because your body does need some rest. From a cardio standpoint, getting into like some sort of like walking or movement daily, but you don't have to be like, it doesn't need to be high intensity really like all of the time. Some sort of mobility training, I mean, 5 to 6 days a week, but like that can be very simple. Maybe you're watching TV, maybe you get on the ground, your kid's doing tummy time, maybe you join them for a little bit. Things like that. So it doesn't have to be crazy. It can fit into your life very easily.
Okay. So is that mobility marker, because you've said it several times already, of getting down on the floor? So are there ways that we can practice? I know that for seniors, a mobility test is being able to get up off the ground without using your hands, because if you fall and hurt your shoulder or your elbow or your hand, you can't put weight on your hands. So you have to be able to get up off the ground. And that's what happens is people will,
I don't know if I
they'll-
can do that.
you can, but people
wanna
will
go
get stuck and they can't get to their phone because they can't get up. They can't sit themselves up with their core strength
Oh,
to get up and go get their phone.
yeah.
Like, and then they're there for 2 or 3 days and then that
Yeah, so that
causes other problems.
so for you, is the mobility part of that getting up and down and just changing position, or is it the physical position that you're actually in while you're on the ground?
It's going to be a combination of both. To be honest, you're going to need different motion, depending on how you get up and down off the ground, you're going to need different ranges of motion in different joints. Depending on how you're sitting, you're also going to need different ranges of motion in different joints, and that's where the variety is going to come in. You can obviously do more like specific mobility training, but more just including it in your life. Those are easy ways to kind of sneak it in.
Can you do a Turkish get up?
You know, when I was doing CrossFit, so after I played soccer in college, and then I was like, "Ooh, I need to do something. What can I do?" So I did CrossFit and competed like once. By no means, I could do it when I was in that type of shape and doing those movements all the time. No, I
She
could not
can do a
that right now.
handstand, and we're just trying to get off the floor.
Have you seen, she can do the things she can do. You know, it's fascinating. It's so funny. So my husband, he like obviously he's very big into, we are digressing here. You made me digress.
I'm sorry.
He's very big into movement and just calisthenics and all of that. And he knows knows of you, because he was like, "Oh my gosh, I was following her." And she's like, just your ability for movement. I mean, it's so, I can't even put words to it. Like your body control is insane. It is absolutely insane it's insane.
If you want to see Dr. Laura, we'll put all of her links in the show.
Yeah, you guys
can
need
go
to
follow her on
You need to
social.
go see. It's just, it is what the human body can do is incredible. And she is such an awesome example of that I could sit and like literally watch your videos and go through and waste my entire day doing that.
Thank you. But it's always like we're all a work in progress. We're all on our own journey. So whether you're starting from just being able to get up and down off the ground without using your hands, or more advanced skills, like the progress in that is valuable, and working and meeting with where you're at that point in time is super helpful too.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up this guest spot and our deep dive. So join the conversation and get your questions answered. Visit our podcast page, so discoverydoc.com/podcast, and you can leave us a voicemail or enter a question there, and we'll get your question answered. And we'll definitely have Dr. Laura back on and get her in an AMA here in the future. So stay tuned for that.
This Thanksgiving season, we invite you to join us in expressing gratitude and thankfulness. Share with us what you're grateful for, and let's celebrate the abundance in our lives. Here are 2 ways to participate. Get your submissions in by November 21st. Number 1, leave us a voice memo. Visit the Discovery Doc website at thediscoverydoc.com and navigate to the podcast page. Record and submit your voice memo sharing what you are thankful for. Number 2 is send us an email. Compose an email to info@thediscoverydoc.com detailing the things in your life that you're grateful for. We'd love to hear from you. By sharing your gratitude with us, you're not only spreading positivity, but also inspiring others to reflect on the blessing in their own lives. Thank you for being a part of our community and for celebrating the spirit of Thanksgiving with us.
Up next, we have our Toxin Tamer feature, which will shed light on common sources of toxins and where they lurk in our environment. All right, Dr. CeCe, back to BHA and BHT. Where are they?
In AK's brain. Where are they in AK's brain? Oh, you're killing it though. You're getting it this time. So BHA and BHT, if we don't know what it is, go back to our previous episode last week just to understand kind of how these 2 synthetic ingredients are made. But AK put a really good spin on it, basically saying that it is the preservatives preservative. So we can find those in common foods that line our shelves. Why? Because again, they make them last longer. So they're commonly found in cereals, in chips, in gum, in dehydrated foods that are meant to be shelf stable for longer periods of time, even in certain meat products, in box snacks, frozen foods. I mean, so much more. There are definitely kind of more common ones that I want to highlight in terms of cereals. Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, all have these ingredients. In terms of gum, Orbit gum and Trident gum are culprits of it, unfortunately. even things like Chex Mix, and then getting into more of our boxed meal products like stovetop stuffing mix and Hungry Jack mashed potatoes, everything from that to Tombstone pizza. I'm ruining a lot of foods right now is what's happening.
So pretty much everything that we grew up on in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, you just probably shouldn't eat it anymore.
But here's the thing. These ingredients didn't exist when we were kids. So that's actually, I'm really glad you pointed that out or brought that up unintentionally, because these synthetic chemicals, they really weren't around as much as they are now. So I would arguably say that those ingredients have probably shifted in the last, 20, 30 years. And there are way more of them current days. Bioengineered foods didn't exist back then. So yes and no, just a little bit different now. But it unfortunately can also be found in our packaging of our food, in cosmetics, other personal care products. So that part can be really, really overwhelming. But that's, I think, the point of these little segments is to get familiar with the words. What words am I looking for? That BHA, BHT, what is it? Why do I want to avoid it? So that instead of being overwhelmed by all these food products that it's in, you're confident in recognizing it. And that's step one. And just saying, oh, wait, I heard this somewhere. I can't remember why I want to avoid this, but let me go find a different option. And it becomes a little bit less overwhelming over time.
Yeah, let that be a little red flag when you see those 3 letters. So it's not just in our consumption, it's also can be absorbed in our skin, because BHT is found in lots of perfumes, even more quote unquote natural perfumes that have essential oils. Some brands will put BHT in it to make it last longer. So it can be absorbed through the skin. So it's not just based on consumption, correct?
Correct. And I would argue to say it's probably more impactful when it's applied on the skin. And because of our skin is our largest organ, so we absorb things readily into the bloodstream from our skin, into our lymph nodes from our skin. When we consume it metabolically, there's a lot of different processes that go on that have a chance to break down these chemicals. Skin, it's like whatever's going on is directly absorbed, and our skin acts as, the greatest barrier, but it's very easily permeable by really, really small particles such as BHT and BHA. So I would say arguably more, I'd be more concerned with it topically, but I would say equally as important to avoid.
Yeah. So that's a great point too, is that when we get a toxin on our skin, no matter what the toxin is, how I've heard that it's been like up to 2 minutes before it's present in your blood. So if you put it on your skin and then did a blood draw, that it would be present in your skin. I know gasoline is that way. Some of the toxic chemicals from that can end up in your bloodstream within a matter of minutes.
Yes. I mean, a good example I use, because some people, we forget this fact. And so a really good, easy example is if you take a topical hormone. So let's say I have a postmenopausal woman who wants estrogen cream. Of course, me, I'm using bioidentical estrogen, but regardless, it's still a cream. And so that woman is applying cream to her skin, to a thin area of skin, and I'm managing those estrogen levels by blood work. So we wouldn't have topical medications that I can, look at or put a value on in terms of blood work if it wasn't absorbed directly into the blood. And so that is how powerful anything else can be that we are topically applying. Any cream, in terms of our facial regimen or body regimen or personal care product or perfume or sunscreen, deodorant, that's all of these things, yes, can penetrate our skin, and depending on the permeability of the skin tissue, and get inside into the bloodstream, like Kate just said, I mean, within the matter of minutes. That's why medications work that are applied topically.
And that's why the Toxin Tamer segment is so valuable. So even if you're just listening to this every one-off, just go back and make sure that you've made a note of, hey, I need to avoid this. You don't have to remember all the details. Just remember it's on your do not purchase list. It's on your ditch and switch. And we're going to get to some amazing things that you can do to address it in our next episode. So don't miss a beat with the Discovery Doc podcast. Subscribe today and turn on notifications for our weekly dose of health wisdom and encouragement delivered straight to your device. In this segment, we'll be tackling the world of medical myths and urban legends. Join us as we debunk some widespread misinformation and set the record straight. All right, Dr. CeCe, this is a big one. I get asked this question all the time. Is cholesterol bad?
I love this question. I love this question. So I'm going to say no with an asterisk, okay? Because there's different types of cholesterol, right? So no, it's not bad, but we'll talk about parts where it could become quote unquote bad. So first of all, the basics, we kind of need to understand the basics. And I think that a lot of Americans don't just have the baseline knowledge, and it's not our fault. We aren't taught these things of what cholesterol is and what it does in the body. We automatically in our country become fearful of the word cholesterol because it's commonly associated with things like heart disease and plaque and cardiovascular, events. And so in our country, it became like that because of the standard American diet, because it is so rich in saturated and just fats that we really aren't meant to consume, instead of rich whole foods, that nutrient dense foods that have the type of fats we are meant to consume. So I think that because the standard American diet is so high in trans fats and saturated fats, that the medical system has kind of weaponized that to teach us that cholesterol is bad, and to also prioritize giving statins out like candy, instead of kind of flipping it and saying, well, no, cholesterol is actually really good if we eat like this, or if we kind of change our diet like this. So on that good side, cholesterol is, I think it's also important to know that cholesterol is the start to every single one of our hormones. So we have cholesterol is kind of the head honcho. Cholesterol goes into something called pregnenolone, and then pregnenolone carries into this massive web of hormones. It has our testosterone, our DHEA, dihydrotestosterone, estrogen, all our estradiols, our progesterone. On the other side, it has our cortisol and a multitude of other hormones, our thyroid hormones in there. And so when we have something called this pregnenolone pull, that if we are deficient on one side of that chain, let's say that we're deficient in testosterone, usually it's because something on the other side of that web, like our cortisol, is too high. So all of those hormones are in balance with each other and get pulled in different directions based on where all the other hormones are. But they all come back to that cholesterol. So if we have really, really low cholesterol in standard American kind of talk, that is a good thing. To our hormones, that is not a good thing. That creates so many other problems hormonally, metabolically, when our cholesterol is too low. So when we talk about our cholesterol being high, we want to understand kind of the different components and what they mean. The HDL is considered our quote unquote good cholesterol because it does that good work. Basically, it's like the school bus that patrols our blood vessels. It comes in and collects excess cholesterol from the bloodstream and the artery walls, and takes it down to the liver where it needs to be processed and where it's removed from the body. So basically it's that bus driver, that takes it from the vessels to the liver to be processed and removed. The LDL value is the protein that we do want lower. So L for low, H for high, because that is the protein that can build up and can deposit in those vessels and create that increased cardiovascular risk. Now, what most people don't do, even practitioners, or understand, is that our cholesterol is simple math. So we have our LDL value, we have our HDL value, and then we have our VLDL value. All three of those together are added to create our total cholesterol number. The HDL value does not have an upper limit of normal. So HDL on a standard LabCorp panel, HDL above 39 is considered normal. That means someone with a 40 or someone with 140 has a good HDL. Well, if we're adding that 40 value to our LDL or VLDL, our total cholesterol is going to be lower. If we add that 140 value, that heightened, to our LDL and VLDL, now our total cholesterol can stay high. And it's for the right reasons though. So a lot of practitioners will look at that and say, ooh, you have high cholesterol. We got to put you on a statin. And I'm like, no, dude, just do simple math. Just do math. Yes, it says total cholesterol is high, but why? It's because that person is eating an awesome diet of, raw, local, or I should, raw butter, raw milk, local farm fresh eggs. We have our good olive oils and avocados in there and our nut butters and seeds and all these whole foods, and their HDL is nice and high, which is protective of the brain. And we're just not doing simple math. We're categorizing that same person into the person who has high cholesterol because their LDLs are through the roof and they have no protective value from the HDL. So
yeah, why look at the root of the problem when we can just put a medical Band-Aid on it and get paid?
Do I have to answer that?
No, that's a rhetorical statement. That's just putting that out there.
It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. I can't tell you how many patients I have that I'll run a lipid panel and they'll be like, yeah, my PCP just said, I have to be put on a statin. And I'm like, please do not. Let me show you the most simple math to just show you that you are actually optimal. And that simple math is you want to take your LDL and divide it by your HDL. So we have that LDL number, even if it says it's high, you still could be optimal. If we take that LDL number and divide it by our HDL and you're under 2.5, there is zero risk, no risk whatsoever of cardiovascular disease, of anything, zero risk. If you're between a 2.5 and a 3.5, now you're kind of in an intermediate risk where, hey, what dietary changes can we make? What lifestyle changes can we make? Do we need to get something like red yeast rice on board, which is a natural statin, to lower that LDL value? Do we need to get some omegas on board or berberine or something else to increase that HDL so that your ratio starts to change? That's an awesome place to be to make adjustments. If you're over 4.5 in that ratio, that's where the risk factor comes in terms of heart disease, cardiovascular disease. So most patients that I have, their total cholesterol will say high, and sure, their LDL might say high, but the HDL, that school bus, is so good. It's picking up all those little kiddos off the bus stop and taking them through the liver faster than they're building up. And so the actual risk is not there.
Which is why it is so important. And we say this, I think we say this every couple of episodes, why getting your labs done yearly knowing your own ratios gives you more power than you could ever imagine. So if you are going through and you have your HDL and your LDL and you're going through your ratios, well, if they're in that normal range for you, then you're great. But if it spikes and goes off the charts, then hey, something's up. Something is wrong for me.
Exactly. And I would say moreover, even further, let's say that you have a big genetic history, you have a family component. Just because you have a family component or a predisposition does not mean that it's an issue for you. We are all genetic mutants. We all have our risk factors. It does not mean that they are turning on and causing an issue. And so there's further tests, more specific tests that can be done than just a straightforward lipid panel through LabCorp to kind of assess that risk if we know you have a genetic component. We use Boston Heart Lab. Boston Heart Lab and they go through insurance, but they also cap out at, I think, 100 and don't quote me, it's either 179 or 199. So fairly cost effective, but for an entire panel that goes through every single specific lipoprotein as relates to our cholesterol, which means that we as a provider can look at that and assess, okay, what here is genetic risk and what is a current actual risk right now that is heightened that we need to do something about. Because at the end of the day, we can't change the genes, but we can change if they activate or not. So getting a little bit more thorough of a panel if you are someone who has history of high cholesterol or familial, high cholesterol, and then understanding, okay, is this something that I'm genetically predisposed to and that's changing some of my numbers, or am I truly at risk right now for cardiovascular disease? Another big factor there is I always suggest, if you are going to a PCP and they say, hey, your cholesterol panel or your cholesterol level is really high, and you're like, oh, wait, I remember from the Discovery Doc podcast to do my ratio, and you take your LDL and you divide it by your HDL, and it's under that 2.5 or under 3.5, and they're still pushing a statin. Number one, you need a new doctor. But number two, then I would challenge them and say, hey, you know what? Before I start the statin, before I start it, before I think about starting it, before I entertain it, order me a calcium plaque score. And if you get the calcium plaque score and your ratio is below that 3.5 or 2.5, and it's a big old goose egg, if it's a 0, that you have no risk at all. So I would never advise someone in that moment to start a statin.
Beautiful. That's all great information that you can do something with today.
Yes.
So I have a question. What happens when the bus gets full and it doesn't drop things off at the liver? Is that a thing? Does that happen? Or is that plaque? Is that the hardening of the arteries? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on there?
Yeah, so when the school bus is full, that's that ratio that we're talking about. So when the school bus has empty seats to pick up kids, that means that your ratio is under that 3.5 moderate zone or under that 2.5 optimal zone. We have empty seats. If you are in that 3.5 and above or 4.5 and above, now we're at a high risk category because the seats on our school bus are full. So there are two things that can happen or that we can do in that moment. Number one is assess where that's coming from. Why is that happening? Is it happening because there's too many kids, which would mean the LDLs? The LDLs are too high. There's too many kiddos to pick up from the school bus. And number two, are there not enough school buses? So we can add school buses, which are HDL values. We can add more to the fleet and have more kind of pick up those kiddos, which means going back to, okay, do we have room in our diet to increase our good fats? Do we need to get omega supplements on board? What is our diet looking like in terms of inflammatory foods? What is it looking like in highly processed seed oils? Is there room there, or is it something kind of more urgent to kind of reduce those children that need to be picked up? And that's where something like red yeast rice is my favorite. I tend to use Zymogen at least 500 milligrams twice a day to help reduce the amount of kiddos that need to be picked up from school. To then further answer your question, yes, that's where we get the risk of plaque building up and forming and blocking those arteries.
Yeah, get more school buses and pick your kids up.
I love our analogy. We just came up with this, guys.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so let's move on to good fats in our diet, because I know you have some points on this, and then I have a question. Or do you want me to ask my question first?
Yeah, ask your question.
Okay, so can I overeat sticks of butter, eggs, and fatty red meat and increase the cholesterol in my blood from dietary fats?
Two kind of questions there. One, can you overeat it? Two, can you build up your cholesterol? So one, yes, you can absolutely build up your good cholesterol by eating all those things. Two, I do think you can overeat certain things. So this is like a really loaded question. So part of that question is understanding your body and what your body needs to thrive. And not everybody can handle the same amount of everything that you just said. Now I'm a firm believer that our bodies are meant to eat those nutrient dense rich foods. And so no, like those eggs, butter, those are whole nutrient dense foods. So those don't scare me. We talked about this the other day where you eat sticks of raw butter. I wish I could do that. I'm a texture person. I can't do it. I wish I could do it. But that's our ancestors, ate this way. And being that close to the natural version of foods that were put on this earth for a reason, I would so much rather you eat those all day, every day. But I do think that overconsumption is possible with anything, even if it's healthy, quote unquote healthy, or it's candy. I do think, variety is good for us. But with that said, those foods are really nutrient dense. So they're wonderful at helping those school buses come up. They will also raise your triglycerides. So your PCP might have a panic attack because your triglycerides will be over, really high. But again, triglycerides have gotten a bad rep because usually it's from highly, highly processed inflammatory seed oils that are covering our sausage that we get from Waffle House and not from, farm fresh beef that is as least processed as possible.
So there are, I mean, we could have eggs every day and it wouldn't, I mean, like one egg or two eggs a day for breakfast, starting off your day with a protein rich, fat rich breakfast. And it's not going to change my blood lipids, my cholesterol level based on my diet, what I eat as a dietary cholesterol. So I guess that's my question is,
Oh, yes, it will.
okay,
Yeah, it absolutely will bring up those HDLs, which is what we want. So to increase the HDLs, any good fat in the diet, that's if we have, so patients or people who follow more of a Mediterranean type diet where it's rich in salmon and olive oil, like pure olive oil, the HDLs will be super high. But again, there's no limit to how high an HDL can be. And so their total cholesterol will say that it's really high, but it's for that HDL value. So it's for the good reason. So yes, if you do eat tons of eggs, if you do eat, the good grass-fed kind of butter or meat, red meat, whatever it is, yes, it can absolutely impact your HDL value. I do not see it negatively impacting the LDL value. I do see it increasing the triglycerides, but I had a bodybuilder who ate 12 farm fresh eggs, so very different farm fresh eggs versus ones in the store that are covered with bleach and the whole 9 yards. And his triglycerides were 350. I mean, off the charts high. He was the healthiest human. Cardiac plaque score was 0, no risk factors, nothing, but it's because he was eating those awesome eggs every single day. So America has just changed, I think, those values to reflect what a standard American diet is and not somebody who is eating so close to the earth.
yeah. So it's better to have a high HDL based on whole nutrient dense foods than a high LDL because we're consuming toxic seed oils that are processed chemicals.
Yes. And also the flip side too, either way, we want that HDL number to be higher because total low cholesterol. So again, Americans love to say, oh, my cholesterol is low, like low R cholesterol, but low cholesterol, i.e. not enough of that good fat, of that good brain fuel, literally can reduce our cognition. It has been proven so much throughout literature to cause brain atrophy in regions of our membranes, of our synapses, of our myelin, and that then does not allow our brain to function properly. So there's literally literature that tells us that low cholesterol is associated with cognitive decline. But here we are in America, saying that everybody should have low cholesterol. No, we want that cholesterol high, but we want it high for the good reasons. We want it high because those good fats are neuroprotective, are protective for our hormones, not because we follow a standard Americanized diet where our LDLs are through the roof and we have no good cholesterol to combat it.
Well, I think you busted that myth wide open. And of course, I think we'll talk about this again because it needs continuing education and continuing conversation. And so if you have any questions about cholesterol or anything that we've talked about in this episode, drop us a note, let us know. If you want us to dig in deeper or explain things in a different way. I really like our school bus analogy. That makes sense to my peon of a Swiss cheese brain over here. Because it is I think with the Western information, it just gets so muddled and we just kind of miss the whole point and get fear mongered into having, low cholesterol. And we want the ratio to be in the perfect space. That's what we're after, not high, not looking at the numbers, but looking at the ratio is our key indicator.
Exactly.
All right. Until next time.
Let's
discover together. All right. Stay ahead of the game this season with Dr. CeCe's favorite health picks and swaps. Sign up for our mailing list at thediscoverydoc.com to have them delivered directly to your inbox. And also become an insider for extra special perks. See us next week as we dive into or myth bust raw milk. So you won't want to miss that. That wraps up another episode of the Discovery Doc podcast. We hope you're inspired by Dr. Laura's practical tips on movement and progress, armed with a new knowledge about cholesterol management and more aware about the toxins around you. Remember, your journey to optimal health is just the beginning, and we're here to guide you every step of the way. Join us next week as we continue the conversation with a deep dive into the fascinating world of raw milk and the surprising health benefits. Don't forget to submit your stories of gratitude. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay healthy. We navigate the vast ocean of health information. Let's pause for a brief disclaimer. The content of this podcast is intended for general, informational, and entertainment purposes only. While we're thrilled to be your Discovery Doc crewmates, we're not here to replace your doctor or healthcare provider. Think of us as your fellow sailors on the journey to better health, sharing our knowledge and experiences. Remember, always consult a qualified medical professional before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Like a sailing adventure, this disclaimer may change occasionally, so be sure to check back for updates. Stay healthy, stay curious, and keep sailing with the Discovery Doc.